Okay, this is the second part of what we are going to go over for medical decision making, and we're going to be talking about data points. Data points is kind of an interesting thing because it doesn't exist in the 95 and 97 guidelines, and yet they are used everywhere. Pretty much any audit will look at data points, and they're pretty firmly established that this is the way to evaluate them, even though they're not officially part of the 95 or 97 guidelines. Some of the things that I'll be showing you are directly out of the guidelines. As a matter of fact, all of them are. This is just a way to quantify as Medicare puts it, the amount and or complexity of data reviewed. So without further ado, let's go ahead and talk about data points, and then we'll go into the example that we've been kind of going with, and then we will kind of go over what's on this worksheet and what's not, just so that you're aware and have kind of a clear understanding of what's going on. So data points are on the right hand side to the diagnosis points that we just over. This is not a comprehensive list. There are two or three things missing off of this list, and the reason is again, this worksheet was developed with primary care in mind. The major components are here, and I think you'll see kind of where we're going. It'll be easy to adapt. I'll try to see if I can find. I did create one that was a 2-page comprehensive version, and so I'll see if I can dig that up, and it just might be helpful for you guys in different specialties. So data points. The idea here is that you get credit, the physician gets credit for data that he has either generated and or reviewed. The reason that it doesn't play as huge of a deal, doesn't play a huge part in the determination of the code in family practice in particular, is that let's say that you order 16 labs on a patient, you still only get one data point. And you'll notice that the first one in data and diagnosis is this is 0 to 1 category. That's typically where you land. And even if you land on 2, usually your diagnosis points and or risk are at that level or higher. So it's really a rare case where you get into 3 data points. So if the physician documents that he orders and reviews labs, that's 1 point. Now, if he orders and reviews them in the same visit, that's still only 1 point. If he orders them in one visit and then reviews them in another, then for the first visit he gets 1 point, and for the second visit he gets 1 point. Another thing is ordering or reviewing imaging, so radiology, anything in the 7,000. Ordering, reviewing labs is anything in the 8,000 range for CPT codes. So any imaging that has been ordered and or reviewed is worth 1 point, and again the same rule applies. If he orders and reviews it in the same appointment, it's only worth 1 point. I'm going to skip this overread or overread, depending on how it's in context. Ordering and reviewing diagnostic studies, that's anything in the 9,000 series. Again, same rules, 1 point. This overread, I want to explain that. The technical term that you'll find in the guidelines is independent review. So if somebody comes in for the best example I think is an x-ray, and the physician takes the x-ray, looks at it, gives his clinical impression in the note, and then sends it to a radiologist to confirm the findings or to find his own findings, that is called an independent review. So one way to think of it that I've been told, and I think is a good way to think of it, is that you get 1 point for the film itself, and then you get another point for the radiologist report. The same thing can be done for diagnostic studies. If somebody orders a EKG and then sends it to a cardiologist for an independent review, that would be then a total of 2 points. You get an extra point for that independent review. But that's what overread means. If a physician reads the film and then sends it off to radiology, the film is said to be overread. and that's where the term comes from, and when it applies here you get an additional point for that. Keep in mind that you get 2 points for the clinical impression at the time of the visit, and then also another point for the radiologist report. Sometimes people get confused and say, well, it's a total of 3 points because I get 2 points for one and 1 point for another. No, you only get 1 point for each. The two things that aren't on here is if you order old records and you don't even touch them. It's just in the note. It's stated that records are ordered. That is worth 1 point. It's not on this data point chart, but that is worth 1 point. If you obtain the history from somebody other than the patient, that is 2 points. So if you have like an interpreted visit, that's worth 2 data points. I just had a thought, and it's not something I've confirmed with anybody, and I don't think it would count, and that is the question of, for instance, a newborn. A newborn comes in, you can't get the history from the newborn because they're not quite at the developmental stage for speaking. You have to get the history from the parent. I don't think that counts as 2 points. I'll confirm that and let you guys know what I find out. If you order old charts and you summarize the notes, summarize the findings in a note, the physician does this, sorry, not you guys, that is worth 2 data points. So a good example is an ER visit. Somebody comes into the ER, they follow up with their family practice physician. The family practice physician says, patient was admitted to the ER 3 days ago following a motor vehicle accident. Labs were taken, hematocrit was normal, and the x-rays were also taken of the fibula-tibula area, no fractures were present. Other lab work is done. Please see other notes for less relevant details, something like that. It's obvious that he's pulling the information from somewhere else, and that would count as 2 points. Now what's interesting is typically you're not going to find that in the assessment and plan. Typically you're going to find that in the subjective, and it does count. So just be aware, and I don't think it's on any of the assignments, but it might be. So be careful and be sure to review pretty thoroughly. So that's an overview of data points. Just to show you how it works, I'm going to go to my example. Right here you can see kind of an advantage of doing an EMR is that I've got all the orders that are listed here, and so it's pretty easy to see what's being done. But it's also up here. Check CBC, BMP, and iron studies. And then above, you can't see it very well here, but above you can see that there was a UA. They did a hematocrit. There was a HCG done to see if there was pregnancy. I don't care necessarily where you get it, just so long as you can point somewhere to the documentation and say, this is where I got the data points from. That's the most important thing. So I've got BMP, a basic metabolic panel, CBC, ferritin, which is an iron study test. It's also a lab. Urinalysis, which is a lab. Hematocrit, which is a lab. A urine, which is a lab. And an iron plus IBC, which is also a lab. So I've got a whole bunch of labs here, 7 total. But remember what I said, no matter how many labs you get, you still only get 1 point. So back on my worksheet, I'm going to highlight the 0 to 1 area. Yeah, there we go. Alright, next time we'll talk about risk. Risk, I think, is the thing that makes the most sense to providers. And I'll show you both the full risk table and then have a miniaturized risk table, so that way you can see kind of the difference. And I'll see you in the next video.